Oh, I take it this is because Rebel Taxi reviewed that show. Okay, I'll bite. Sockey Chooks is a 3D CGI cartoon that aired on Cartoon Network from 2008 to 2009, just before that happened. It was a co-production between Decode Entertainment and Aardman. Yes, that Aardman. It was a short-lived series that was not well received with critics in the States and wasn't all that popular there either. Some said it was too violent for children. Personally, I think that the action wasn't very impactful and sometimes weirdly edited. What really got me wasn't the hollow action, flattish characters, who in truth had some pretty smart lines, and a fairly fleshed out relationship at that. No. It was the genuinely bizarre world that it took place in. Not necessarily the giant mall, as the cast was oddly designed. Like, they were very loosely based on animals. The extras in the mall were barely animals at all. They were just very abstracted characters. They really got me confused. I think the overall vision for the series was just underutilized and not cohesively applied. Right now, let's just break down the main cast and see what they have going for them. Chucky Chan is, believe it or not, one of the main trio and the one that most resembles a chicken. That said, he is a walking cliche. I ain't gonna sugarcoat it. Full-on Fu Manchu facial hair, talks in nonsensical similes, and has a thick Chinese accent. So thick they had to replace his voice actor with somebody else, so it seemed less offensive, air quotes. Whoever took his place was never named, probably because they didn't want to be associated with the show. I wouldn't mind his characterization so much if there was more to him, but there really isn't that much else, aside from him being tone deaf and falling in love with a mermaid who has an equally horrible singing voice. Then there's his disguise, which barely is one. It's just a different colored gi, and he has his hair tied back. Come on, man, even Clark Kent put more effort into his disguise than that. Just goes to show how completely inept Dr. Wasabi's men are.
Blast!
Chickpea is the most fleshed out among the Chooks, but her visual design has some minor hiccups. While the Chinese cardigan sells the look of a martial artist, her hairstyle and white plumage make her resemble more of a swan than a chicken, which would be fine if the intro sequence didn't insist that the group was composed entirely of chickens. Slightly wonky conveyance aside, she's a very solid character for the group, since she has to play off the more comedic Kayle Joe and the obtuse Chucky. She's a very solid straight man to the other two. She also has the most backstory of the Chooks, as she has 2 episodes that deal with characters from her past, those being Professor Sher Khan and Oni, who both will be covered later. Heck, she's probably the only one who has a defined motivation. She wants revenge on Wasabi for trashing her house and building a gigantic freaking mall over it. Overall, she's a good character who plays to the strengths of the show's visual style. I wish I could say the same for the next guy.
All right.
Kayle Joe is a real mixed bag for me. He is by far the most entertaining character as far as dialogue's concerned. While he's not book smart like Chickpea, he is without a doubt witty. Still, why oh why does he look like a member of Earth, Wind & Fire? I understand that is a reference to films like Black Dynamite, but I can't help but think there would have been a better appearance for him. Especially since of the 3, he is the least chicken-like. I understand that this show is going for a very, very abstracted look, but nothing about his design tells me he's a chicken. You know what these three could have really benefited from having? That would improve that conveyance? Some tail feathers! It would fix this and Chickpea's design issues on the spot. The reason why they didn't do it is beyond me, because this is from the same studio that gave us Chicken Run. They've done this before. They've done it better, just with like plasticine clay, but still, they've designed chickens. That said, I think his disguise looks way better than his fighting outfit. All in all, he's got the personality, but a lot of the overall design just really hurts his score.
Blast!
I'm going to be short with Bubba and the Ninja Monkeys. Their design's simplistic, but at least it's clear, thank goodness. Their purpose reads well, but they're only semi-functional as characters. They need to play off of the Chooks or Dr. Wasabi in order to make a functional scene, especially when it comes to the monkeys, who really don't have much in the way of personality. They just get the job done, which leaves a lot to be desired. Bubba's a little bit better, but again, he's just a big dumb brute. There's just nothing interesting going on with Bubba.
Crazy!
The main villain of the show, Dr. Wasabi. He's your standard evil scientist with the big ego and German accent. He's got some good dialogue, but that's about it for his character. His design's a little weird too. Supposedly he's a piranha, and I can sorta see where they were trying to convey that with his water-filled dome and sharp teeth, but in truth he looks like an evil cucumber rather than a fish. It's not like they couldn't add some scales and gills to him. One of 3D animation's greatest strengths is to be able to put texture and detail onto objects and characters without being a complete pain to animate. Since instead of having somebody draw it over and over and over, you're having a computer rendering it out with precision. And it's not like they couldn't do it because they gave Sirens song scales. And really a German accent? A German accent again? Do we need another one of those? Well, at least the dialogue's entertaining, but like if you've seen another evil scientist, they've probably been done better.
Blast!
Koby was a fellow student of How Kung like Chucky. But he fell to his anger and ultimately became even more snake-like after failing a series of trials. That was, in all honesty, a poor method of building trust between the two of them. Seriously, Master Yoshi, what the hell were you thinking? So he leaves the dojo and swears revenge, eventually coming back to poison the trio with snake venom, because, of course, it had to be venom. His design is rather strong, nice snake theme, good use of texturing. Lessons, Dr. Wasabi. There is only one glaring issue that drives me up a wall with him. His hood is not attached to his head. Why? Having it separated from the head just makes things more difficult for the animators, because that's going to have to be rigged and animated independently of the spine. Of all the things they decided to make harder on themselves, it had to be this nonsensical decision? Just have it attached to the head. If you still want it to move about, just put some bones on the side of it and have those flop about. Just, this show is full of perplexing decisions. Still, probably the second most interesting villain.
Blast!
Speaking of which, we have Oni, otherwise known as Deadeye. She was one of Chickpea's childhood friends who developed an eye condition that Dr. Wasabi managed to help her refine. And by refine, I mean turn it into a weapon of mass destruction, because evil scientist man is gonna do that. Eventually, she returned to Wasabi World to finish her business with the Doctor. I must say that of the more abstracted characters, her design is very strong, mainly because of it being focused on the idea of emphasizing her eyes. Her civilian form's hair is flipped to cover her evil eye, and vice versa for her villain outfit. Even though she appears in one episode, I really think she could have been a reoccurring character, and why can't I find some dang footage?
Alright.
Professor Sher Khan was mentioned before as Chickpea's mentor. The two of them caught up in the episode Double Trouble, where Dr. Wasabi hired him to make robotic copies of the Chooks, because we had to have one of those episodes. Apparently he lost his legs in some accident and that's why he needs Wasabi's money. Robotic legs and the obvious mad scientist look are fine, but again, I have to ask, what is he? He's got a big head, buck teeth, but green skin? Like, the level of abstraction on him is confusing. Is he supposed to be some sort of mutant beaver?
Bravo.
Sirens' song deserves a passing mention since we brought her up too. Though let's be honest here, she's basically the Angelina Jolie fish from Shark Tale, but has a New York accent. No, really, the main character falls head over heels for her, and she's basically only in things for the money. The entire episode was just one big love triangle between her, Chucky, and Wasabi. Because of course there needed to be a love triangle in the series, not like that's ruined other animated shows.
Bravo.
Master Yoshi is more or less what I said about Professor Sher Khan, but with Chucky's archetypal role as a wise kung fu mentor. Except that he's even worse. It's his trials that ultimately caused Koby and Chucky's rocky relationship to go into complete hatred. Oh yeah, let's give them the trials that have been known to ruin friendships half the time. I'm sure that these two already at each other's throats will get along swimmingly. Also, his page on the wiki is like really defaced. In fact, half the pages on the wiki are just filled with weird info that makes absolutely no sense at some points. Seriously.
Crazy.
Throughout this entire review, time and time again, this show's stylization has produced some good designs and some genuinely weird ones. This makes for a rather confusing world for the show. Sometimes the characters are actually animals, while other times they are borderline surrealistic. While it could be that they've been mutated by the waste and chemicals that permeate all of Wasabi World, except that Master Yoshi is also an abstract character who never was at Wasabi World. This makes for a world that is visually confusing if you think about it for more than a second. But Design Dungeon, this is a kid's cartoon that's focused on action and not world building, to which I would say, you don't need to go deep into world building when making a setting for such a show. You should at least give it a bit of coherence. Let's look at some of its contemporaries. Chowder, for example, much like the Chooks, has a lot of abstracted characters like Mung and Schnitzel, but since the world is basically filled with characters that are just as strange as the main cast, you don't really mind it. But here there's this very distinct line between the ideas that were put into the main cast and then the secondary cast, which raises questions about the setting that simply distracted me from the show as a whole. While it's well written, the visuals and the editing of certain shots struck me as a bit odd. If you're really looking for some good kung fu shows, I'd advise going for something like Shaolin Showdown or Jackie Chan Adventures. Oh, of course, Avatar: The Last Airbender, if you're one of the few people out there who haven't seen it yet. I just find this show to be, well, mediocre. It's not bad, but it's not particularly great. It had a decent amount of stuff going for it, but that's mostly due to studio pedigree. I mean, my goodness, it's Aardman! Stop motion supreme! Doing this. But the concept art looks good. I'll give them that.
Next time on Design Dungeon.
No. You were supposed to be dead long ago. How did you come back? How?